To the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon, for her time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chairwoman Jackson-Lee. Thank you for calling this hearing, and to all of our witnesses for testifying here today. Yesterday, we marked the 10th anniversary of the devastating shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and today we reflect on the tragedy earlier this year at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde that took 21 lives and wounded many others. Our children deserve bright futures, not the traumatization of active shooter drills or actual active shooters while learning their ABCs. Far too many lives have been cut short by senseless gun violence. Faith Mata, I too am tired of hearing the stories of victims. Although I'm incredibly grateful to you and your parents, to Nicole and her colleagues from Sandy Hook, and all the families impacted by school shootings in Uvalde, Parkland, Sandy Hook, and Columbine and beyond, in communities of faith in Charleston, Texas, Minnesota, and more, the families of shoppers in grocery stores from Buffalo to Boulder, and relatives of victims of shootings at places of entertainment in Orlando and Colorado and Peoria, as well as to the advocates in my district and communities across America who've experienced gun violence, but turned that experience into action and advocacy for their communities. Today's hearing has been called to explore whether there are bipartisan solutions to gun violence, and I would welcome actionable, real suggestions from our colleagues across the aisle based upon actual data and facts. And if they don't have real solutions, then I think it's important that all Americans know that. One of the issues we have in devising bipartisan solutions is that we have to work from a shared set of facts. I appreciate the perspective of several of our witnesses who have shared recommendations based upon verifiable data and evidence. We know what the problem is. As Dr. Guerrero notes, guns are now the leading cause of death among children in our country, not any other country. And more Americans of all ages have become victims of gun violence, including myself. It shouldn't surprise anyone that in the country that has more untraceable guns and unregulated gun users per capita than any other industrialized country in the world, also has the highest rate of gun violence per capita. Now, at the outset, we need to confront the myth that the Second Amendment bars any restrictions on the possession or use of any guns by any person, a myth perpetuated by the gun industry while reaping billions in profits. In fact, the Second Amendment is not a suicide pact, and like every other part of the Constitution, is subject to qualification in certain circumstances. What we don't need is pseudoscience or deeply flawed research that's been repeatedly debunked over several decades, as is unfortunately the case with Mr. Lott's research. Senator Gutierrez asked, how many children have to be murdered before we're willing to ban the chosen weapon of school shooters? And how many people have to be killed before we take reasonable steps to end murder, and I would add, prevent suicide? In the 116th and 117th Congress, my colleagues and I have proposed legislation to implement evidence-based solutions to prevent gun violence, which are both constitutional and broadly popular with Americans, including universal background checks, a ban on assault-style weapons, extreme risk protection laws, and safe storage laws. We need to enact those laws. One area where I am in agreement with our colleagues is that it's important that we enforce the laws that are already on the books to the fullest extent possible, although that alone is insufficient. Unfortunately, decades of underfunding and legislative roadblocks have made it impossible for the critical Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms to fulfill its duties when it comes to keeping guns out of the wrong hands. Mr. Heine, earlier this year, your organization published a report entitled Uncovering the Truth About Pennsylvania Crime Guns that tracks guns recovered in crimes traced to gun dealers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. One of the most striking things in the report is that 90% of these guns can be traced to a handful of Pennsylvania's gun dealers. Can you elaborate a little bit on the findings around these numbers and tell us what the problem here is?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks so much for the question, Congresswoman. I couldn't agree with you more. We talk a lot about gun violence and solving for gun violence in terms of who's pulled the trigger, and what we don't ask enough of the time is where did the gun come from? That Pennsylvania report made it really clear, and a more jarring statistic is that 50% of the guns that were recovered in Pennsylvania, of the near 100,000, 50% of them came from only 1% of Pennsylvania dealers. This is a very solvable problem. And if we make tactical law enforcement investments to go after these individuals, these negligent and irresponsible dealers, we can have a tangible impact on the flow of illegal guns. There are too many communities where it's easier to find a firearm than it is to find fresh produce, and these are not things that grow on trees. So we have got to enable ATF to do their job and to go after these irresponsible and negligent dealers.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I see that my time has expired, but I would like to request unanimous consent to insert into the record the report we were just discussing, uncovering the truth about Pennsylvania crime guns. And is that for unanimous consent?
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay. I'd also like to submit for the record a November 3rd, 2022 article from The New Yorker titled, "The Shoddy Conclusions of the Man Shaping the Gun Rights Debate. John Lott is the most influential pro-gun researcher in the country, but his methods and findings have been repeatedly debunked."
Without objection, so ordered.
I yield back.